All right, good morning, everybody. Let's talk the race preview and initial thoughts for Las Vegas 2. We're on race one, I should say, of round three of the NASCAR playoffs. So there's only 8 teams left competing for the championship. And over these next 3 races, you'll be able to lock yourself into the championship four. So if we see one of those 8 drivers win this weekend at Las Vegas, they will automatically be locked in for the final championship race at Phoenix. So that'll be exciting to watch, seeing how those 8 playoff drivers do. But from a DFS perspective, let's try to figure out how we want to approach this weekend, some of our initial thoughts and strategies coming in before practice and qualifying. So it is the second time we are at this track, but it's been a long time and we have learned a lot. If you remember from the first Las Vegas race, it was a lot of cautions, a lot of teams having tire issues, getting stuck on the track. We've really learned a lot since the first Las Vegas race. So yes, I think there's some data in there that you can rely on, but for the most part, we just want to look at the 1.5 intermediate tracks as a whole. I wouldn't like weigh one of them heavier than the others, but just know that there's been a lot that we've learned since the first time we've been here. In addition to looking at the 2022 1.5s, let's also dive into practice and qualifying. Let's see how these teams are arriving to the track. Let's see if they're able to back up their practice speeds in qualifying. We know how important track position is, especially with this next gen car. Usually practice and qualifying is pretty telling on who the quality cars are going to be, and it allows us to figure out what drivers we want to be maybe heavier on or drivers we want to be a little bit under the field on. So 267 laps, which gets you to about 400 miles, I think, for this race. So with that being said, as far as Dominator points go, the last couple of races at Talladega and the Roval, we haven't really been too focused on Dominator points as far as kind of a lineup construction goes. But now that we're back at 1.5, Dominator points are going to be back in play. There's 66.75 points up for grabs with laps led, and there's 120.15 points available for fast laps. So trying to increase our Dominators, increase our, drivers in our lineup that have the ability, the opportunity, the potential to get out front and lead laps is going to be important. That's a lot of points to chunk up. That's going to rack up, and we want to try to make sure we're accumulating as many of those Dominator points as possible. We did see a lot of cautions here the first time we were here. Again, the teams have learned a lot. They've improved. This car has gotten, slightly better. However, we're still seeing cautions be a lot higher than normal. So just keep that in mind as well when it comes to building lineups. Most likely, we're going to see some teams wreck out, have some tire issues, maybe a toe link gets, kicked out. We've seen power steering issues, motors blowing up. You name it. We've seen issues with this car. So with that being said, too, it maybe opens up the door for some drivers who maybe don't look as good on paper as far as their practice and qualifying times go, but maybe they can have a good day because other drivers might have issues. Now, trying to predict those drivers that have issues is going to be near impossible, but it's just something to keep in mind that we have seen a lot of issues throughout the 2022 season. So when we get to pricing, is when pricing came out, there was a couple of drivers that stood out. So as always, when you get to the Cup Series, really the 8K range all the way up to the top of the slate, I think is viable as far as these are the bulk of the plays where your Dominator points are most likely going to come from. Now, yes, maybe a Butcher or Jones or Suarez or Cindric or Dillon, like someone like that could get out front and lead laps. But for the most part, we can feel pretty confident that it's going to be from the 8K range all the way up to the 11K range or the 10K range up there. So drivers in green are initial drivers who I feel confident in, who I probably want to lean more on than drivers in yellow. But I think drivers in yellow are also in play as well. And once practice and qualifying comes, we'll be able to kind of, eliminate some of these drivers, maybe increase our interest level for some of them. Coming into it, I think it's really Hamlin, Bell, Reddick, Chastain, Byron, Busch, and Truex. Those are my favorite dominator plays. My drivers I want to target. I probably want at least 2 or 3 of those drivers in my line if possible. And then depending how practice and qualifying goes, then maybe I'll look more at a Chase Elliott, a Kyle Larson, a Blaney, a Logano, maybe even Bubba Wallace, Harvick, Briscoe. But for right now, as far as just looking at the 2022 1.5s, recent form, pricing, point per dollar plays, I really like Hamlin. Hamlin has been very consistent. He's the most expensive driver on the slate. He's still in the playoffs. He's very consistent. He's going to be up there most likely towards the front of the field. Christopher Bell, what a crazy win for him at the Roval, basically locking himself into the round of 8. He needed to do that to advance. So that was really cool to see. That race kind of got stupid at the end, but nonetheless, Christopher Bell was able to come out on the other side. So this is a really high price tag for him, but he's been one of the best cars, not only at JGR, but also in the field. So I really like Christopher Bell and Denny Hamlin. Those JGR Toyotas are fast at the 1.5s. We have seen some recent struggles with them, but again, it's been more at tracks, kind of like the short tracks or the road courses, tracks where we didn't really anticipate them to run well. But these 1.5s, so it's when we've seen these Toyotas show up. Reddick, Chastain, and Byron, those are probably my favorite Chevy plays to pair, maybe 2 of them or 3 of them, depending how high you want to go on the slate. But Reddick's been looking very fast at the 1.5s. Chastain was really, really good over the summer at the 1.5s. He's cooled off recently, so maybe that keeps his ownership down. Byron's another player who I think, might not get a lot of ownership, a lot of look based off of some other drivers priced above him and or priced below him. Kyle Busch at $9,300. This is really cheap for Kyle Busch. He has been having a terrible last month and a half or so. But if there's any place this team can turn it around, I think it is going to be Las Vegas. And then Truex. Truex doesn't really get a ton of ownership. He is out of the playoffs, but I really like his price tag there at $9,100. And if we can try to get 3 or 4 of those drivers in our line, we're also going to need some more value plays to round out the rest of our line. And initially, I really like Noah Gragson in the 48 Hendrick machine there. Again, Alex Bowman is sitting out with concussion-like symptoms for the next 3 races. So it's a really great opportunity for Gragson to step in. I mean, this is top-tier equipment for $7,300. His team will have practice. Depending on where he qualifies, I think it's very easy for him to pay off his price tag. We've seen Eric Jones run well all year long. And then you're also going to need to dip down a little bit lower on the slate, most likely, depending on, who you're taking. And if you're taking 3 or 4 drivers out of the kind of the 8K range and above. But you got to feel good about McDowell. He's been consistently finishing, 8th to 12th, 12th to, kind of 14th. He's kind of always in that range. Stenhouse is really cheap. He's been kind of like Kyle Busch, has just been completely awful as of late. But over the summer stretch, we saw him really run well at some of these 1.5. So if they're able to bring even just half of that speed that they had earlier in the year for $6,000, I think that's a nice price tag there. And then my favorite value plays are going to be Ty Dillon and Harrison Burton, probably with Ty Dillon being my favorite play there. And we'll see. Again, I wouldn't completely rule out some of these back marker cars especially if they start, dead last with how many cautions and incidents that we've seen. But most likely something of, probably 3 to 4 of these drivers, 8K range and above, and then trying to round out the rest of your lineup with some of these value plays, unless there's one of these drivers is just a clear place differential, like they didn't take a qualifying time, and, that might change lineup construction a little bit. But we'll talk about it once practice and qualifying is done. But that is the initial preview for Las Vegas for the Cup Series. We will get a Xfinity Series initial preview video up later today. But yeah, best of luck and talk to you guys here soon.